You'll note that there is no written lecture for this session, since I feel that I had plenty of time in the last session, plenty of opportunity to add my 2 cents regarding this reading in the book of Jeremiah. But of course, Louis Stolman has some sense to add, particularly as regards what we generally call Jeremiah's confessions. But as we saw last week, some have referred to as laments. In particular, Stallman focuses a good deal of attention on what I've been calling the state apparatus: the king, the royal court, the royal city itself, Jerusalem, the temple, the priests, the false prophets, who are apparently trying to convince the royal court that everything is okay. However, for Jeremiah, the crimes of the state and the people of Judah generally are beyond repair. There is what Stallman calls a foreclosure of hope. The book begins to develop the theme of utter destruction using what will become a ubiquitous warning that I discussed in last week's lecture, the threat of cherev, ra'av, and dever, war, famine, and disease. We'll be reading this litany of destruction over and over. Stallman will also help us understand the theological significance of Jeremiah's suffering, a suffering that reaches a crescendo in Jeremiah's lament that he regrets even having been born. He urges people to reject the normal flow of human life, weddings, having children, and that these normal activities of life mean nothing in the face of the ensuing destruction. I love the way Stallman rebukes all of us to some degree, in that we generally fail to confront this aspect of Jeremiah's prophecies from the comfort of our own houses of worship. Stallman ties all of this into what he calls the theodicy of the book of Jeremiah. That is, how God's attribute of justice can be seen in suffering. This search for justice comes out especially in what Stallman calls Jeremiah's third confession. I find it fascinating the way Stallman comes to understand the critical role of Shabbat in the ultimate resolution of these complex theological issues. I would tend to agree with Stallman that in this regard we are taking a look back from the perspective of the post-exilic community, as priestly editors, compilers, and redactors began to make sense of the Jeremiah material to which they fell heir. After all, much of the hope that emerges from the book of Jeremiah is a hope that only becomes apparent in the aftermath of the exile, in a restored Jerusalem under the Persians. Perhaps that's true of much of what we come to understand as the redemptive aspect of suffering. The redemptive quality of suffering, for the most part, can only be seen from the view of the redeemed.